Well, tonight we're here to talk trash. I'm Chantal Chung, president of the Hawaii Farmers Union United Kona chapter, and also project manager at Mā'ona Community Garden. And then our other wonderful speaker is Evan Lam of Circlepack, Hawaii. Evan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Evan, Circlepack and the Con Group, and yeah, excited to be here tonight.
Okay. Okay, told me we're being live streamed. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Whoa. Wow, that's big. Yeah, you're going to hear my chickens. They're very talkative. So excuse my chickens in advance. So we're going to be talking garbage to garden, compost time. And there we go. So like I said before, I'm a project manager at Mā'ona Community Garden, and we have a community composting project, but our mission is much larger, supporting community food systems and then improving the capacity of Hawaii agriculture. We sit on the three-legged stool of research, outreach and education, and community-based economic development. All of our projects have those three same priorities. We're located in South Kona in Honau now. This is one of my favorite graphics of the food system because it shows how a lot of these things are interconnected. And tonight we're talking about waste, but waste is connected to every part of the food system. And we want to connect that waste all the way back in to be a resource for the creation of more food, the creation of more jobs, and the increasing of our environmental sustainability. So here's a bit about how we come up with our projects. You know, it seems a bit much, but there's a process of finding the need, defining the need, looking at the environment that the need is in, and then creating pilot projects and solutions. And then how we're able to evaluate those pilot projects, and it helps us to be able to duplicate it and help other communities at the same time. So it seems like a process, but all of this is necessary. So our community composting project came about through a realization. Hawaii County did a study, and we realized that there was so much of what was going into our landfill, over half could be composted. And there are already quite a few projects going. There are solid waste management plans, and we thought, okay, so how do we stack up as Hawaii County with, so on the left of your screen is the Hawaii County's numbers. And on the right of your screen is the national average, give or take. So the national average actually separates out food, where our Hawaii County numbers did not. I believe food comes in under putrescibles. But you can see a huge amount could go right back into our food system, right back through composting to become a resource rather than going to the landfill, which gave me a lot of hope. I thought, okay, why isn't this being done already? Right? It's such a problem. Food waste and paper waste, they both are huge CO2 emitters. They're huge polluters unless they're treated differently. So we'll make sure they stay out of the landfill. We thought, well, how do we do that? How do we do that in the best way possible? We wanted to turn all of these emission sources into something better for our food system. So we took a look at what we've got around, right? Who could we partner with to make this happen? So in 2016, at the beginning of the Hawaii Ulu Producers Cooperative, we were able to partner with them to divert all their food waste. Since their beginning until now, they've never even put 1 pound of food waste or paper waste into the landfill. So all of their trimmings, all of their cores, skins, they all get either going to pig food or to compost. So you can see the numbers right there, 100,000 pounds between the years 2016 and 2019 of processing byproduct going to compost on member farms. Most of that was me in the truck running back and forth. It was so worth it though. We partnered with 2 other organizations, Adaptations, state board member Maureen Dada and her family, Patel's Service Station. And you can see that it was a whole lot of hauling. It was daily for a while with the food waste. Filling the truck, bringing it in, filling the truck, bringing it. I felt like I was on a merry-go-round. So then we involved the community. We started having community shred days. Evan had brought his 2 wonderful shredding machines. And we started experimenting with how much could we process in one day. And we went from just a couple 100 pounds up to, I think our record was on one machine was 800 some odd pounds. Am I correct? Yeah. So with 2 machines, we got up to 1,400 pounds. I think that was our record. Or did we bust that yet? No, not yet. We're going to bust that one day. We will bust that record. So the community, every 3rd Saturday, we have a community shred day to get more farmers using. You'll see the image of the red truck. That's a farmer filling up. When we have our shred days, our farmers will come and fill truckloads. Some of them will come back for a second load in that same day or the next day because they're using it for weed mat. So we use it for the worm bin and the composting, but it's also incredibly useful as weed mat. So through the project, we've been experimenting with all the different ways that farmers and gardeners can use this cardboard instead of it becoming an emitter, instead of it having to be hauled in the large trucks or shipped away, because our cardboard in Hawaii County actually gets shipped to Taiwan. So when I've had that people ask the question, oh, I put it in the recycle bin at the transfer station. I'm recycling. Well, yes and no. You're recycling in a really long fossil fuel burning kind of way. So all of that at the transfer station gets baled up and trucked to the port, and then it gets placed on a shipping container. And the shipping container goes all the way to Guam. So it does not stay with us here in Hawaii or even in the United States to be recycled. It actually goes overseas, burning bunker fuel the whole way. So we need a better local solution. These are examples of our composters. We have 16 thermophilic that's using heat-loving bacteria, microbes, to break down the food. And we have one large 40-foot by 4-foot cement vermicomposting bin using using Indian blue worms to create vermicast. They're fast, they're furious. I wouldn't lay down in the bin if you paid me to. They're voracious creatures. My good friend Maureen Data from Adaptations gave me a sandwich baggie of worms a few years ago. And we placed them into a bathtub. And they so liked the ulu waste that they turned into 2 bathtubs full. And then 2 bathtubs of shower bottom. And they just kept doubling in population. It was a little frightening. So then we decided to build the large bin. And it's based on an Indian model. And the reason that we'll use, instead of a more expensive bin, is we want people to get to Mā'ona, look at our bins, and have a feeling of, I could build that. Oh, I could afford to do that. Oh, I have that in my yard. Rather than being turned away from composting by seeing a too expensive system. Because a lot of the flow through bins are 10,000, 15,000, 25,000. This entire bin, I think we built for, plus the canopy, was 1,200. That's it. And a lot of that was the tent cost. Although HPM gave us a wonderful deal, so thank you to HPM. But we really want people to feel empowered rather than disempowered when they walk away. We want to lower the barriers to entry for entrepreneurs that could do composting and create a stream of income rather than having expensive equipment and focusing on equity rather than exclusion. So you can see I built the bins out of old wood, catchment tank parts, and each one of the 16 thermophilics is built a slightly different way to demonstrate a slightly different material, a different variable change, whether it be the material, the height, the placement, all those things. So people can see how they could apply that in their yard, in their school garden, at their place of work easily. We involve the community in all kinds of workshops. You'll see in these pictures, these were OHA funded workshops and also Alulike and Kupu interns. They were able to come and learn how to do composting in their communities and at home. And we based a lot of the project on literature review, what other municipalities were doing. Because in a lot of the circumstances, we don't want to be reinventing the wheel every single time. We based a lot of it on successful sea grant projects. This one is from Michigan State University. The fisheries on the Great Lakes. That's fish waste and agricultural waste put together to make a soil amendment. The other successful project was in Alaska. Then we looked at how composting is done in other municipalities. So in this graphic, specifically New York, in their Decentralized Community Composting Network, and California, both have really strong programs, but most states, other than Hawaii, have strong decentralized community composting programs. And a lot of it is guided by the US Composting Council. And they have a regimen of testing and certification for a lot of the programs across the United States. And these are the common challenges, tested solutions. I'm not going to read them all to you. I'm sure you can read them. But again, we did not want to reinvent the wheel. We didn't want to set ourselves, because the Institute for Local Self-Reliance did a study in Maryland. So we took a look at that and applied that to our situation. Do the challenges absolutely match up with Hawaii? Oh, yes. And so we looked at their tested solutions that they've used in other municipalities and started to create solutions. And Evan will talk more about the project, because that's the part he is so very good at. I like to dig around in the worms. Evan's the thinker. All right, as we pause before we get to Evan, questions? No?
You said the shred days are every Thursday or every Friday?
Every third Saturday.
Third Saturday. Saturday.
And then we make them available so the community can come and run the shredder and pick up cardboard. It's very zen. I love that shredder so much. It's the funnest thing ever.
The utilization is for weeds, and you use it for composting?
Both. So both weed net and composting. What I'll do is I'll combine it with wood chips to smother weeds. But as it breaks down, it retains moisture, and it also prevents erosion. So, and it also doesn't have the expense and the plastic of a weed mat. Goodness gracious. And if you hit it with a weed whacker, it won't wind around the weed whacker and infuriate you. I've done it so many times.
No, yeah, we carpet down and for pathways, and it just overgrow, and we'd have to remove it because we would get the carpet stuck in the weed whacker.
Yeah. So you don't have to remove this one. You just keep layering on top of it, and the soil gets deeper and more moist and deeper, and you just keep going. I've had spots that I've done, oh goodness, it must be 4 or 5 layers already, and it just disappears.
Wow. Okay. Well, you'll be seeing a lot of it.
I'm severely addicted to shredded cardboard. I'm just putting that out there right now. It's once you have it.
For you too, Chantal.
Yes. Hey, Odysseus.
Hi, Chantal. Does using shredded cardboard or just flat cardboard as a weed carpet, does that affect organic certification in any way?
I believe it would. So that's a bridge that we haven't crossed yet with organic farmers. That's a part of the study to see if it could become applicable. Now, what we do at Mā'ona is we sort. We take a look at a lot of the different types, and part of the project has been taking a look at, oh my gosh, there's, cardboard is not a monolith. There are so many different kinds. There's plastic coated cardboard. Oh, it's so distressing. The dyes and inks. We're sending in samples from our vermicast to test to see if some of the dyes and inks make it through in the form of heavy metals. Now, in the United States, a lot of the inks are soy-based. However, the pigments themselves, we want to make sure that there's none of that bleeding through and going into our farmers' fields. So hence the lab testing, due diligence.
So if we wanted to use the shredded cardboard and keep our organic certification, we could use it in composting and that would be okay, or?
I don't know. That's part of the study to ask and see. So we need organic farmers to take a look at their rules and regs and then see if that applies. But Evan may already have more information about that. I don't know.
Okay, I'll look into that one.
Yeah, so
Thank
it's in
you.
the works. It would be great to work with HOFA and be able to see how this could work for organic farmers.
Great, thank you.
Good to see you. Questions?
Aloha. I have a question in regards to the cardboard shredding. As we collect a lot of cardboard from the food bank that we're associated with, but we try to sustain from using like the cardboard that you guys are talking about, you know, the one with the plastic or like the film. So in your guys, do you guys still incorporate that? And is it still like effective, you know, or are you guys, because I'm more worried about leaving all those like plastics in the soil, but yeah.
So
do you
we
guys-
strip the plastic prior to, the plastic film absolutely cannot go through the shredder because it'll get caught up in there. Even the Amazon boxes, we have to take off that Amazon tape because you think it's paper tape, but no, it is reinforced with fiberglass strands. I cried when I went and I found the manufacturer. I was just like, are you kidding me right now? Are you kidding me? Why? I wish it was anything other than cotton, US grown cotton. So about the question of, so we segregate paperboard, anything shiny has a petrochemical applied to make it shiny. Anything brightly colored, we segregate out. And I'll tend to use those in the roadside areas that are already contaminated. So along the roadside, I won't use them in the worm. We tried it. I was unhappy with the results. So it goes by the roadside because all of that is all that brightly color. There's a price to that and it's chemicals.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You ready for Evan? Any more questions?
All right, sorry, one more question.
Yes, of course.
So you know, for your vermicompost, like we're starting up our bins too, but I really like the idea of the cinder blocks, you know. And then there was also the other one, the other picture you had. But I noticed that the other one, it looked like it was more like a planter box, but it wasn't really shaded. And I know for us, we try to keep them as shaded as possible, as well as wet, or like we wet water them every day. But is there a technique to having them kind of out in the sun, or is it preferred to just keep them in the shade?
It's preferred to keep them in the shade. So the open bins that you saw with the pink uala on top of it, those would have been on the right-hand side of the screen. Those are one of the 16 thermophilic bins. So those are the hot bins that use the microbes to break down the food waste rather than the worms. We really only have the one worm bin that's kept under cover. I don't like people to touch it. I don't like people to go near it. Evan can attest to this. I'm a little weird about that bin. So the worms, because they're breeding, they need a specific temperature, they need cover. And also our large worm bin is fully sealed. So I don't have to irrigate it because it keeps all of its moisture. The worms actually process more cardboard, and we don't pass any of the highly acidic leachate into the environment. So we're experimenting with ways that you can work in sensitive environments, say coastal zones, in and around gardens, because that leachate is full of pathogens. It's basically unprocessed compost juice. So I've heard people refer to that as worm wee or worm tea. No, No, that's leachate, full of pathogens, very highly acid. Yes, you can use it if you brew it down and do a bubbler and let it age. But undiluted, that thing will kill anything other than bananas. It won't kill bananas. So that there's a reason for and then you saw the placement of those bins, the thermophilics, they're all by baby trees. Then they're movable. So that particular bin gives up its moisture and its nutrients to that baby tree. Then once it's full, we move it over to the next one. And that helps us to save money on irrigation, but also the tree keeps the moisture optimal inside of that bin. And if when we water the bin, it's watering the tree with nutrient rich water, two things one time.
So the bin is just like on a movable platform, and underneath is just like plenty pukas, and then it just goes through after you water
No,
it?
the bottom is open. Those
Oh,
thermophilics, the ones on the right-hand side of the screen. Nobody moves my worm bin though.
okay.
I'm nuts. You ever seen a chicken, the broody hen on eggs? That's me. That's the worm bin. But the thermophilics, we move all the time. I'll let it sit there for about a year. And then once it, mickles just right, and then we harvest it and move it to the next spot.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Gary, you have your hand raised? Gary Rosenberg.
Hey, you guys, thank you. Chantal, thank you. Evan, thank you. Good to see you. Hey, I'm sorry, I got here a little bit late. I don't know whether you guys discussed the shredded cardboard in a K&F scenario as a bedding material in a deep litter situation with some K&F inoculants. If you did and I missed it, I apologize.
No, I have not tried that with the KNF. I would like to partner with somebody that wants to try that. There are so many different applications for the cardboard, because oftentimes you don't have trouble finding the nitrogen for your compost pile or your even bokashi, but you will have trouble finding all of the carbon. So
I've already discussed it with Evan. I would love to work with you guys on that.
Fantastic. I will put my email into the chat and we will do said thing. I would love to see mushrooms grown on sterilized shredded cardboard. That would really freak me out, right? I would love it. So many different possibilities, but Evan can talk more about that. I don't want to steal his moment. Any other questions from me before we turn over to Evan? No? Okay.
I'm going to take that as a no.
Okay, go.
Hello, everyone. I'm Evan, and I run Circlepack. And the main goal, the main objective of Circlepack was to test out ways to turn something that was going to waste into a resource. Could we go to the next slide, please, actually? So I actually started Circlepack to make packaging supplies. My parents here in Waimea, they run a nail polish business. And one day my mom came to me and she's like, we have all this cardboard and we're also paying to import our packaging material to send our orders out. So it feels like there's a way we can deal with this. And so I invested in some cardboard shredding machinery that we found it's manufactured in Germany, and it's a tabletop machine that we can plug into a 115 volt. We can run 2 of them off a generator at Chantal's. They're mobile. They're a little bit heavy. They're made out of metal. They're pretty rugged, but they produce a lot. They can shred a lot of cardboard. As Chantal mentioned, we can do about, at one of our community shred days, we can shred about 1,400 pounds of cardboard in roughly an 8-hour period. I've been running this for about just over a year and a half, and we've shredded with, I think, about 4 or 5 regular locations. We've shredded about 23,000 pounds of cardboard over the last year and a half with 2 machines. So as you can imagine, if we multiply that by 10, for instance, we can kind of actually start playing a recycling game. Most of that cardboard has gone into either mulching on small farms and gardens, or it's gone into the creation of compost. And the reason we like the shredded cardboard is because these even perforations that are really good for packaging material also like act really nicely in compost. They act really nicely as mulch. In the compost, they kind of prevent the caking. If you've ever tried to compost a whole stack of cardboard that's not shredded, it can pressurize and kind of stick together and turn into this chunk that doesn't go anywhere. We can shred paper, we can shred paperboard boxes, cereal boxes, beer boxes, all these kinds of things. It is a bit work intensive. We have to clean all the tape off when people bring their stuff in. So we ask people to remove the tape and staples of their boxes and bring them in flattened down. Because we then also have to kind of cut them down into usable sizes. As a mulch, it's really wonderful. My favorite part is that the perforations allow the water to seep in. So you can cover the surface of your garden or your soil with this material. And then when it rains, the rain will have a way to perforate and get down into the soil instead of just running off the surface of the cardboard. And it actually ends up molding a little bit. As Chantal said, we've been experimenting with a lot of different usages. Gary mentioned the K&F bedding for chickens. We can chip it into tiny little pieces and create kind of this fluffy confetti style stuff, which you can inoculate and put in a chicken pen. I hired a local artist probably about a month ago to make us some tote bags, which we've been testing out. And we've also tested out making compostable pots. Right. I'm sure a lot of you have dealt with many more plastic pots than I have in my lifetime. But we've made these pots, we're testing them with ulu plantings. And the idea is that we can make a pot that'll last for like 6 weeks to 2 months. And then you can just take the whole thing and put it in the ground and it'll dissolve. The glue hopefully will dissolve. We're looking for biodegradable glue. And we can create something for someone to do and ideally work on, and then also replace something that we're importing. The next slide, please. And so this is on the left what the machine looks like. This is the back end of the machine. It's pretty compact and you can feed cardboard through it. And it works quickly. One machine, if you have a pile of prepared cardboard, can go through roughly about 100 pounds an hour. And then to illustrate Chantal's point, this is the journey of a cardboard box. This is kind of how far it travels in its lifespan. I have a friend who's actually a forester in Canada, and he plants the trees that people harvest and turn into cardboard fiber. It takes about 50 to 70 years for those trees to grow. And then those trees are chopped down and they're harvested and they're sent through this supply chain that kind of goes down the West Coast through paper plants and paper mills in Oregon. And then it's shipped out of ports after being filled in fulfillment warehouses, shipped to us 5,000 miles across the ocean, or what is it, 3,500 miles, whatever that distance is. And then it's shipped to Asia. So the county of Hawaii here, they ship all of their recycled cardboard that's collected at the transfer station. All of it goes to Taiwan, Hong Kong, sometimes the Philippines, Malaysia, places like that. And then sometimes that cardboard is recycled and shipped back into the same logistics system, right? So we end up with this kind of really wild loop. And to give you a sense of the scale, we calculated that the state of Hawaii roughly deals with 100,000 tons of cardboard a year. About 65% of that is sent through this system that I'm talking about where it's shipped. Oahu burns plenty of it through their H power plant. And then basically the rest is landfilled. And as Chantal mentioned, it, when it goes into landfill, it creates emissions, it creates greenhouse gases, because these are kind of deep unmanaged landfills that the materials rot and they create methane. Not to mention the carbon footprint of transporting these things around the island. On Hawaii Island, we have one landfill. As you guys know, we're the biggest island. And so the county actually calculated that they spend about 650,000 vehicle miles in heavy diesel trucks transporting our trash to one place. We have no composting facilities. We have 2 green waste stations, and we have the largest landmass and the most agriculture in the state. We also have to import all of our fertilizers. So if we go to the next slide, I think this is a problem that many of you are probably more familiar with, which is that Hawaii has a lot of exposure to the kind of stuff that's going on right now. Drastic increase in prices, inflation, food prices, these kinds of problems. And so Circlepack has kind of evolved into this experiment of how do we close this loop? How do we do one thing, see if it works, and then see if we can accelerate it? So in April, actually, both of my machines broke. And all of the programs that I've been running at the nonprofits, at some public school gardens, and community gardens, basically we've just halted, because basically we're the only ones working on this. But there's a silver lining, because that opens the opportunity to order a bunch of machines and kind of level up and see how it works with 8 machines on island or 10 machines in a network. And the thinking behind that, if we go to the next slide, is what is our strategy, right? With everything that's going on right now, I think the question that I would pose to you guys, not only in the realm of recycling, of creating inputs, but also in the realm, very importantly, of food production, is what is the strategy right now? Richard Rumelt, who's a professor of strategy, says there's 3 parts to a strategy, what he calls the kernel. And that's a diagnosis or an explanation of what's going on, a guiding policy to influence and filter the way that we act on those things, followed by coherent sets of actions to implement the policy. And I'm from Big Island. I was born in Oahu. I grew up on Big Island. And I came back in April 2020. And I think my impetus for getting into this kind of work, because I never imagined myself shredding cardboard, not in a million years, or working on composting and helping build a decentralized composting system. But things unfortunately haven't changed much. We still know that 90% of our food supply and materials and all these things are imported, right? So I think the question is now, especially for people in food systems, people who do advocacy or lobbying or legal work, basically everybody who's kind of professionally involved or communally involved in these spaces, is what is the strategy? And what are we doing as individuals, as collective teams of people, to act on these same issues, right? Because we see this stuff, we know it's happening, we know it's been going on for decades. So what do we have to forget about? What do we have to unlearn as people, as individuals? And what do we have to do as teams to impact these trajectories? Because from where I'm sitting as a 30-year-old person from Hawaii, it looks like it's getting a lot worse, just to be frank. And yeah, I'm trying to work on it. We're trying to, we've had some impact, I suppose, on the county of Hawaii. They have some money to put into a composting facility, and we've convinced them now that building another centralized facility is a bad idea. And so now they're seriously evaluating the idea of building a decentralized composting system. And me and a small group of young folks that I know here are working to interview some people around that and figure out what the needs of people are, what practices are already going on locally, so we can direct that money, that investment in infrastructure, because we need it. We need it sorely. We need it badly. And you know, it's unfortunate that we are where we are, but I don't know. I think we also have some great opportunities in this time to kind of do something a little different and think about it a little differently. So with that being said, if you guys want to talk, I guess we could talk about that. I thought that took that slide out, but still there. Anyway, so this is, okay. So anyway, where it was going is we are doing interviews with people, and we would love to talk to farmers, people in the food and ag system from Hawaii Island about how they manage their organic waste, so that we can continue to feed information into this process to direct public investments, right? Because everything takes money to run, things take subsidies, we subsidize ships, we subsidize, you know, the import of foods, we subsidize hotels. And yeah, I think if I could leave one thing, it's the question of, and maybe for HFUU as a whole, is what is the strategy here? What is a real strategy? Because we got to do something. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat, and if you would like to interview with us, you can schedule a time slot with one of our team members, Anissa. She worked at the Ulu Club for many years. Some of you already may know her, and she's working with us to do some of these interviews. So we would really love to talk to some of you guys if you have the time. Thanks. And I guess we'll open it to questions now.
I wanted to add the important thing about giving these interviews. Now, the team, and they came up with a really smart strategy here, is that instead of collecting a lot of data, like polling everybody like everybody else does with questionnaires, they want to create and gather deeper data. They want to be able to interview stakeholders. So as a farmer, as a producer, your needs are incredibly important. And how is it knowing how a better waste management strategy and what kind of resources and what kind of inputs for soil amendments will help to guide the projects and programs. So giving the team of wonderful young lights of the world input would be most appreciated. Thank you. Questions? Come on, don't be shy.
I have
We
a
can't bite you on
question.
Zoom.
Aloha, everyone.
Hey,
Aloha, Evan.
Easton.
Aloha, Chantal.
Hello.
Hi. And I see Desires over here and Gary Rosenberg in here. Aloha. So I have a question. We have plastic that is on the cardboard. Have we gotten to experiment if there are funguses that consume the plastic? I heard something like that a while ago, that there's some mushrooms that feed off plastic. Do we know anyone on island that does that? That's my first question.
Not on island, but where were somewhere in gosh, someone was telling us about that. They just discovered a fungus that eats plastic, but we don't have it here yet. And I don't think anybody's working on it in the state of Hawaii, unless they're doing it covertly. More power to them.
Yeah, I've been kind of watching that for a little while because I'm super curious. I know that they just discovered another species of bacteria in Germany that was found in like a dumpster that was eating plastic. The other thing I know of is that someone is producing an additive somewhere in the plastic manufacturing process where you have to add it as you're manufacturing the plastic, where it makes it bioavailable to bacteria so that they will actually be able to eat it. But I haven't heard of anybody that's kind of managed to figure out the bacteria thing at a large enough scale that it like makes sense. Or like at in some kind of form where you could, like, I don't know, spray an inoculant into a pile and it'll eat the plastic or something, which would be awesome. But yeah, not that I know of. But if you know anybody, let me know, because
I'll let you know.
Yeah, because peeling every single piece of tape off of cardboard. I
takes half the
love
time, right?
cardboard and I'm addicted to it, but the tape makes me insane. I've made several reels about my tape rage just because there's so much of it. It's amazing.
And Evan, I think you were mentioning your friend is a part of the cardboard making process. Is the cardboard that we get straight up like wood, or is there other ingredients in it, like glues, or are there microplastics in the cardboard as well, like that we don't know about? I use cardboard all the time on my garden, so I just go for it. But
so that's a good question. So the cardboard itself, like the brown papery craft material, that's tree fiber that's been chemically broken down and then kind of rolled in and steamed into these sheets. The adhesive that they use to kind of stick the sheets together, so they get that, the little wavy part of the inside of the cardboard, and then they stick 2 sheets on top of it. That's a cornstarch based glue. It's mostly cornstarch and water. There is a small like chemical additive to that makes it sticky, but that's part of the reason it comes apart so easily when it gets wet, is because it's a very simple kind of cornstarch glue. And then when you really get into the plastics and stuff, that's when you get into the, like Chantal was saying, like the heavy inks and the kind of lamination and the tape. The tape is probably honestly the biggest source of plastic that we find.
And that's the reason why we took our time. So every box has a stamp on it from the manufacturer. So part of the data collection process that we've done over the few years to collect the names of every box manufacturer, that every box that ever comes through. I know it seems very, very extra, but it's got to be done. So there are domestically produced boxes, and then there are internationally produced boxes. So in the United States, soy-based inks, corn-based adhesives, but we're less sure about what comes from the international market. Hence, the resulting vermicast is being lab tested, especially for the EPA 503 heavy metals. Looking through it, I'm looking under a microscope and looking for microplastics. So there's a reason that we've taken our time in developing the product. We took our time in developing the methodology to make sure that everything that comes out of that worm bin, we can say that, yes, this is okay to put into food crops. At this point, without the data from the lab testing, without taking the, oh gosh, it's almost been 4 years of really doing the research and due diligence. It upsets me when people throw stuff in a pile on the ground and call it compost. Because what they haven't done is they haven't examined its impact to the environment in leachate. They haven't examined the resulting compost product's viability or effectiveness. It's, well, because it's composted, it's okay. Yeah, no, and a no. Due diligence and looking, especially when you're using a waste product. So everything we get from the Cooperative is pre-consumer food waste. But when you're dealing in post-consumer food waste, it's a whole nother set of steps to make sure that it is a good product to use on the farm. So we want to be sure before we start communicating out a lot of the methodologies that this is the way it should be done. We did years of literature review in order to come up with our methodology so that we're not a vector for invasive species. So we're doing our due diligence and removing as much of the risk out of the inputs as possible.
Cool. I have a couple more questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely, go for it.
What is the cost like of these cardboard shredders? Like, is it pretty accessible for most of us, or like you're trying to get Cook County to support and subsidize these things? Like, how much does a shredder cost? You broke 2. I'm trying to get one.
I helped.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
That's entirely our fault, by the way. That is, there may have been some oil maintenance that may or may not have gotten done that I may or may not have been aware of. The shredder that I got because it was kind of a low cost option. They're expensive. So the one I have is about $2,500, was the cheapest I could get it bought and shipped to Hawaii. So we're looking at purchasing 8 for our nonprofit friends, and that costs about $20,000. That being said, I mean, I haven't seen anything else that can hit really that side, that like speed of processing and amount, because it's really important. There's almost no downtime spent. Like, the machines overheat a little bit, but once we figured out how to ventilate them right, and we're also thinking about modifying one, you can kind of just run them. We got it to the point where we could run a machine for about 6 hours straight. And like I said, we can hit 1,200, 1,400 pounds of cardboard in a day. And if you consider even doing that 4 times a month, you're processing about almost close to 2 tons a month, with a $5,000 investment. For recyclers, when you look at like brand new processing equipment to bale things, to shred things, like a real landscape grinder, the kind of thing that you could put a car through, you're looking at upwards of $90,000 at least, just to purchase the equipment. Not to mention, you need to set up it on a concrete pad, you need to pull power, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't make a ton of sense as like an individual investment, unless you're sitting in a space where you're either purchasing a ton of inputs or purchasing a ton of mulch. It makes a lot more sense in a community space where you have multiple collaborators, right? So the reason this kind of makes sense for us is I work with Chantal, I work with a Hawai'i market in Kealakekua, and we set up a dumpster collection program. So there's enough material to process. I also have some small business clients who purchase packaging material from us. So, it really makes sense in kind of a network setting versus just having it for yourself, because, yeah. But so definitely worthwhile.
I see. Thank you. And you guys are in conversation with bigger entities to acquire like industrial size shredders, or just starting with what we got, like kind of
I mean, right now, like we've got the small machines, they make sense. They're not heavy, you can move them, you can plug them into a wall socket. And so we're at the point where I'm going to multiply it, basically by 4 or 5 times, and then see how that acts, right? See how when we put all those things together, what kind of outputs do we get at that scale?
It comes down to accessibility and equity, right? By creating a decentralized model, by allowing people to have equitable access to the resource. If we were to only enable larger companies who could afford the larger machines, then that decreases the equity and accessibility. So we want to have, making the rubbish is a community effort. So processing and taking care of the rubbish and taking responsibility for our waste products and turning them into something better should be a community responsibility and a community effort as well. Okay, I think Nick had his hand raised. Nick Azari.
Thank you.
Thanks, Easton.
Thank you, Easton.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything like that going on Oahu? Any composting, shredding?
Yeah. So I think she's on the call right now. There's a woman named Mikala on the west side of Oahu at Nanakuli High School, who runs a nonprofit called Hawai'i Kaiaulu, and they are doing community shred days. They are doing a composting program at Nanakuli, and they have been running these wonderful kind of community events where they also teach kids food skills, you know, how to clean fish and how to garden and create compost and bokashi and shred cardboard. So if you are interested and on Oahu, I would definitely check them out. I dropped their Instagram handle where they post their community days
And
in the
Mikala,
chat.
would you mind saying a few words? Is that okay? Or if you're not comfortable, that's okay.
Aloha kako. You guys cannot see me, yeah? Oh, you can.
Oh, we can see
No,
you
I don't
now.
think so.
Oh, you can see me now. Hey, aloha kako. I am Mikala. I am the founder and the director of Hawai'i Kaiaulu, and I'm also a teacher at Nanakuli High School. But what we do is we started copying what this is like my leadership team, sort of. I read about the Gigaton Challenge and I reached out to them and they gave me all this information and I started from there. So there is monies available for nonprofit side and as a teacher as well to get, we have two on campus and it really is portable. It's heavy, it's about 100 pounds, but literally like the size of a printer. And what I offer is sustainable Saturday events where the community comes in, sort of exactly what they're doing, drop off their cardboard. And what I did was I built relationships with farmers in the community and they donate the fresh produce, eggs, honey, ulu, whatever it is. The CSA is really whatever it is that week. And we give that back to the ohana. So, you know, in general, we're really just bringing back reciprocity in the ahupua'a system because that it was a working system and it can continue to work now. You know, resource recovery, exactly what Chantal said, like we're making it, we should all be taking care of it. So out of my project, we can take care of our community, exactly what Hawai'i Kaiaulu means, yeah. We also I've also teamed up with like the Avid Teacher on School where the students are collecting data on their community service hours and just providing that platform for them. Like since COVID happened, a lot of businesses and there's no cleanups of nothing, you know, so the students come on campus and they work for 4 hours. We're just doing it once a month. Yeah, and we're gonna do it in the summer. Last day of school is tomorrow, but actually my principal said, hey, are you guys gonna do it June and July? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And we also connected with, there's a lot of food bank places now that's just giving out food. And of course they have cardboard. So we've got people now dropping off their like loads of cardboard to us, like not on any random day, but on the day that we've been collecting, but we do exactly what they do, collect the data, jot that down in a calendar, and the students are all doing this. So I did see something in the website where you guys wanted to work with a school to get one. I would love to help that teacher find some ways and even share my grant writing abilities with that teacher to get one for that school.
And that's the best thing is how are all of our projects connected, right? Are we connecting resources, our community to each other, farmers to resource, producers to it? How is everything connected? And that's the main message is that we are, even though we don't think we are, we think we're separate, but that is an illusion. We are all together. We made it together, and we remake it together, and then we make food out of it. So it's all good. But thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you, thank you. Mikala's program is wonderful. I think Odysseus had a question. No?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Actually, Evan, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It's really inspiring to have you. I'm so glad you returned to the island with this energy and intelligence and action. Two questions I have. One of them I think might have been Easton. Thank you for your questions. And what maybe he was trying to get at with asking how much the machines are. is here on the east side. I'm wondering what we should do with our cardboard and how on the east side, if there was any way, maybe after you even get the 8 machines, that we could set up something once a month here for east side. What would it take to get something started over here?
Yeah. Odysseus, where are you located?
On the Hamakua coast, but you know, the East Hawaii chapter, I'm the president of the East Hawaii chapter of Farmers Union, and we do Hilo all the way up to, not including, but up to Waimea through Wanaka.
Okay. Yeah, so one of the people who would host a machine with our fundraiser is Hamakua Harvest. And the other organization that we've also talked to is in Maku'u, the community garden, the Maku'u's farmers market. And so they've both agreed to kind of host and help set up some programs as part of this network.
Great, so that's in the works. Do you have any idea when it might go online? Or?
Once we get so I've dropped the link for the fundraiser, but once we raise the amount and are able to order the machines, I guess we're gonna see how long it'll take, because you know, supply chain things. Ideally within the next 2 to 3 months, we'd have a batch of machines on island and be able to start setting up the programs.
Right.
And
the other question I had was about
is to say to the foundation too, can we get these to our chapters? Right, Vince has talked about it more than once, and this definitely has a value to our farmers. So having that conversation as chapter presidents and seeing if each chapter can host a machine and then do these events for their community and for fellow farmers. So just put that in your mind as a president.
Okay, well, also, yeah. I mean, if Hamakua Harvest and Maku'u were both going to be willing to host, I mean, it might be better just to support them, whether financially or with, you know, with labor or something like that, than rather start our own separately. But yeah, I'd like to find out more what they're planning and take it from there. My other question was what you talked about, your mission to get decentralized collection, and you said what was happening with that. Is there any way that we can help you with that mission? Help you, where's it at, what's going on with it?
Yeah, so we're in the process of interviewing people on Hawaii Island right now, people who deal with organic waste streams, to discover basically what's happening already, so that we can basically make suggestions and kind of direct some of the public investment to supporting regional local practices. So right now we're just trying to figure out what's going on, who's where, what kind of equipment do you have, you know, what do you do, and where are you, so that we can kind of really draw a picture of the landscape of what's going on, so that we have a good idea of where to target and where to kind of direct these things.
So the best thing we can help you do is collect data from farmers.
Yes, the best thing you can do is schedule an interview with us.
And also to encourage all of our membership to do that with you.
Yes.
Yes, sir, because doing the due diligence and collecting the data will create an environmentally sustainable and also economically feasible and cost-effective solution that will last a long time. Because if we make a thing that is not efficient or effective, it will not last. We want to have things that last for the generations, right? We don't want to be constantly going, oh, well, that didn't work. Oh, that's because we didn't do a feasibility study, or we didn't put the time at the front end to really study it. So we won't want to sentence our children and our children's children to a larger and snowballing problem. We want to take responsibility and build an effective system now.
Great. So we should get the link to that you shared with us into our newsletter and get that to all membership and encourage them to get you to,
well, on Hawaii Island
with you.
On Hawaii Island.
On Hawaii Island, yeah.
Yeah,
we're on
for
Hawaii
this
Island.
study, yeah.
Great. Thank you for doing that. We'll
Thank
get on
you. Gary has his hand raised. Gary Rosenberg.
I think Gary may have stepped away from his.
Oh, Okay. Oh,
device.
okay. I just saw the hand. All right. Other questions? You have us for a few more minutes. No question is weird about composting. Questions about composting. I do not know the meaning of life, in case, you know.
Do you compost with black soldier flies ever, or just worms?
Yes, I love them.
Very
They
cool.
actually do really well with the worms. You wouldn't think so, but they'll work through a pile first, and then the worms will very, very enthusiastically go after where the black soldier flies were. And what they leave behind, that is amazing. So you wouldn't think they work well together, but they do. I would like to build a black soldier fly. They self-harvest. There are designs out there for black soldier fly nurseries. They self-harvest, and that's yet another locally made product. Because what are we buying for our chickens? For treats? A lot of people are buying the dried mealworms. The black soldier flies could then become a protein component and fat component to feed. There are so many possibilities with insects and compost together to create local solutions for aquaculture, for chicken food, all those things.
We use black soldier flies. We do harvest them, but we use them mostly for composting, and we feed them to our tilapia in our aquaponics system, as well as our ducks. We have 2 chickens, but I haven't been feeding them with that. But that's very curious. That's very interesting that you said that you use them. They're in the same bin. That's incredible.
Yeah, because the bin is 40 feet long, there's a reason that it's so big, to allow the worms to get away from any hot spots. So in a smaller bin, you've got to be more careful. But in a 40-foot long, 4-foot wide bin, the worms go, ew, too hot, and they'll move over to somewhere else. So we're able to have, to cut out the pre-composting too, because it can get hot in there. And then the worms just move back into that particular spot after it's hot. Then it gives other things like the black soldier flies, a chance to really get in there and dig around. And the holes that they dig, the worms then use them, and it creates airflow in the compost. I can't say enough about black soldier flies. Love them. I would like to put them in a food processor with ulu waste and then pelletize them for fish feed. That's the next, you're invited to my TED Talk on fish feed. Okay, wait, Gary has hand raised. You're back, Gary.
First of all, you guys, I just want to say hi. I just want to say thank you guys for all of this discussion. It's, this is stuff that is so dear, and it's stuff I think about all the time. And it makes me feel so good that I feel like we're all coming around to a more cooperative model, and that we're thinking about soldier fly, and we're thinking about incorporating this stuff. And Evan, thank you so much for what you said just a little bit a while ago about us working together. So I just wanted to say, yeah, you talk about a decentralized model and creating a more of an egalitarian model. And I believe we have such an opportunity, not only here, but on every level. I'm working on such a level with meat processing to create a co-op model. And I really want to invite anyone on this call, if we can possibly coordinate. We have such an opportunity to create food self-sufficiency on this island, and to really be 100% efficient, if 100% food self-sufficient, if we work together. And if we really look at everything that's going into the landfill as an opportunity to upcycle it. And there's so many great thoughts on this call. Really, I just want to encourage all of us to try to find ways of really working together and thinking of ourselves as an island-wide co-op to produce food and reduce waste. And I think if we can find ways, everybody's invited here to my farm to use my farm. We've got a community center that will seat at least 60. If anybody wants to bring people together and host meetings to try to create points of connection, Evan knows how to get a hold of me. Let's make this happen. Time is short.
And I think we have a responsibility here on this island to lead the world into a new model that everyone is really needing and wanting at this moment.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Second that.
And
Thank
we
you,
had
Gary.
a question in the chat from Katie. What are our thoughts on citrus in the compost? I do not allow it in the worm bin. My general rule is that if I had a cut on my arm, if I wouldn't rub that thing that I'm thinking about putting that piece of food, garlic, ginger, citrus, peppers, if I wouldn't rub it on an open wound, I do not put it into the worm bin, because the worms are basically one large, I don't know, they're very sensitive skin. So they'll stay away from that spot that you put citrus in until it breaks down. So putting citrus, I'll do it in the thermophilics. I don't do it in the worm bin because it slows my worms down, but it does not slow the microbes down. So excellent in the thermophilic, where you use microbes and fungi as your primary composters. Not so awesome in the vermicomposting. Whoa, okay. That was a lot of questions. I'm sorry if I missed any in the chat. Any other questions? No other questions? No other birding composting questions? Oh, you can watch the recording on YouTube. Oh, William. Yes. Hi, William.
Has there been any conversation about on the Big Island about teaming up with restaurants on particularly Ali'i to kind of manage the food waste out of restaurants? Has there been any discussion ever about that? I don't know. I'm very new to the island, but I'm very curious.
There are a couple different projects, but some restaurants already have a pig guide. Many schools and restaurants have that pig farm that comes and gets. Many don't. And the purpose of the study that we're doing and gathering the data that we are is to figure out, well, what's available? Because what we don't want to do is assume that there's enough food waste or too much food waste or not enough. We want to know what is there. So charting out the inputs that we could possibly have into a composting system and where they could possibly go while burning the least amount of fossil fuel and traveling the least amount of distance. Evan, do you have additions?
No, that covers it. I mean, we're mostly focused on pre-consumer food waste, things that people haven't licked or touched with their mouths, because there's different safety and health considerations around that, and different set of regulations. But yeah, I mean, you know, I've talked to some of those folks, not specifically on Ali'i, but in that section of Kona. And it's exactly what Chantal says. Some people have a pig guide that comes and picks up their food scraps. A lot of people have just pared down because of, you know, 2020 and COVID, all the stuff that's happened. So they're trying to keep it pretty tight. And I think the theory right now is that we're actually going to see a much larger volume of food waste out of institutions and kind of manufacturers, farmers, all the pre-consumer stuff. But I could be wrong, like Chantal said. So we're trying to figure it out.
Because as we're increasing the infrastructure for food processing here, as Gary was talking about the ranching and slaughterhouses, how do we use that? How do we use the waste that comes out of aquaponics and aquaculture? Mortality in composting is a whole other call. I am fascinated by that, the richness that comes out of it. I only do it on a small scale, but they're doing it on the larger scale. They create a product called tankage on Oahu out of slaughterhouse waste, which is amazing. It's ready to use by farmers. So looking at all of the different kinds of waste, how they could be processed, what infrastructure do we need to get that done? Where are we sitting on the laws, permits, regulations to make those things possible? What needs to be changed? What needs to be augmented? What needs to stay the same? So again, due diligence on the front end and figuring it out before we go stumbling all over ourselves and setting something up that's inefficient or unsupported, or you know what I mean? So we don't want to have our kids deal with the problems that we make right now. Danielle, do you have a question?
Yeah, I actually have a couple questions. First one, do you guys deal with coconut rhinoceros beetle on Big Island?
Yes. God, it's evil.
Okay.
Horrible, horrible. So the reason for our methodology too, we have a 28-day cycle on the vermicast. So it sits in a bucket for 14 days, sealed, so that anything with a respiratory system dies. I'd like to extend that time, and with lab testing, we'll be able to see what the vermicast looks like at 0 days as it passes out of that 28-day cycle, at 30 days after, and at 60 days after. The reason for this is if I can keep quality, but send it longer, keep it longer in the sealed bin, I can catch any of those outliers. So we're charting insect life cycles. So fun with the spreadsheets, and there's a few outliers to the 14 days. So fruit flies and all of them, they'll tend to hatch out of the egg, be a larva, and then they'll pupate within that time. But I want to catch the ones that have a longer. So if I can hold it in the bucket 28 days instead of 14, I'm most likely to catch them through their entire life cycle and be able to suffocate them. Even if they hatch, the eggs hatch inside of the seal bucket, they'll suffocate. But I want to give it enough time to do that, because moving into using coir from coconut, and we want to make sure that we're creating a system that doesn't spread invasive species.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, especially with the ants, fruit flies. I just discovered a lovely stout-legged bug on my ong choy that I was really distressed by. So I want to make sure the eggs of that buddy don't make it through the vermicast, because they fly and drop eggs, and they, especially when you stress an insect, it'll tend to pop out eggs. Coral are the same way, you know. So if it lays eggs in the compost, in the vermicast, I want to be able to get that and make sure they're not transmitted at all. Due diligence.
Can I ask what's in the buckets? Like, is that just the food waste, or is that the mixture of your mulch or paper, cardboard, and the food waste?
So it goes through the 4 to 5 month vermicomposting process. So the worms chew it up. Then I bring it out, I sift it, first sift. Then I allow it to sit. So it's the compost that goes into the bucket, the vermicompost.
Cool.
It goes to the first sift, sits for 7 days, comes down to the appropriate moisture content so I can finer sift it. Then that secondary sift goes into the bucket and it's sealed for the 14 days. Then when it comes out of there, it sets for another 7 days so I can visually observe it, because I'm obsessive. Then I sift it to an even finer sift to catch any eggs that may be in there, any pieces of plastic. Then I'll take that and I'll hold it in another sealed container until we're able to distribute it or send it to a lab. So yeah, I'm a little obsessed with my worm bin. Just
And then I do have just a quick second question. So has there been any efforts to make like a kind of a GIS map of where these resources are coming from, like shredded paper, you know, where the sites are, maybe even potentially where there's invasive pests that have been, you know, found, so that we can not avoid, or we can avoid those areas? And how can we get that on Oahu?
that's part of this project. So using ArcGIS and the data that we gather to determine the placement of the community composting, well, not determine, suggest. Okay, suggest. I don't want to say that, you know, we are rulers of the world. We're going to say where they're going to be. Okay, free will. We're going to suggest the optimal positioning. So where the strip between the producers of the waste and the composting facility. That's taken into account. What pests, that's why we catalog the life cycle of every known pest on Hawaii Island, and even those that are on Oahu too, where the hot spots are based on where Hawaii Ant Lab and also Big Island Invasive Species Committee, they both have maps for hotspots. So by combining a lot of these maps together, then we're able to get a clearer picture of where to avoid and where to go. And so we can gently suggest based on data where these community composting sites could be. And I really wanted you and Evan to meet. I really wanted that. I think you're both such wonderful, young, bright lights.
Yeah, I have the email open right now. I'll just type it out and send it as soon as possible.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other hand raised? We have, let's see, 12 minutes, people. You have 12 minutes to ask whatever you want.
I have my hand raised.
Oh, who has their hand raised? Go ahead.
You mentioned the variety of worm that you guys have. Can you remind me what it is? Can you remind us what it is?
Sure, it's an Indian blue, Perionyx excavatus. These worms were chosen because they are already present in our environment. Rather, it is illegal to import composting worms into the state of Hawaii. I have to say that to everyone. Hear me now, believe me later. So there are reasons for that, because the red wigglers, if they're allowed to get into the environment, night crawlers and whatnot, they can become destructive. So we decided to, instead of choosing an imported worm that's not already present in the environment, we chose the Indian blues, which are already present here. You say, well, if they're present in our environment, they're already doing the job out there. Yes, but we focused their energy. So thousands of them focused on one task in one worm bin. It's like the difference between a light bulb out in nature and a laser in the worm bin. We've just focused the energy of all those worms.
So they're not red wigglers, they're Indian blues.
Indian blues, Perionyx excavatus. They're thinner. They're a bit smaller. They don't get as fat and gargantuan, and their clitellum is flush with their body, their reproductive organ. Whereas in a red wiggler, it'll be larger. It's more, looks like a turtleneck collar around there. But you can barely see it on the Indian blues. And they tend to remain smaller.
Interesting.
So we put a lot of thought into what we could use. Yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, I just didn't. I thought it was called red wigglers, the ones that we find in nature here.
No, those are Indian blues.
Okay.
There are also other ones called Alabama jumpers. You know those coffee land worms, the ones that really go for it, the huge ones.
The long, thick ones, long.
Yeah. Those are good composters as well, a bit slower. And I've always called them Alabama jumpers. I call them coffee land worms, but their real name is Alabama jumpers.
I see.
But they don't like the food waste as much as the Indian blues do. They're more into the cardboard. The Alabama jumpers absolutely adore cardboard. It's like Barry White to worms. I mean, they love it. If I leave a piece on the ground in the farm, they'll be all up about it. So
cool. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing.
I have a question.
Yep.
I didn't raise my hand, sorry.
That's okay.
Hi, I'm Nani, and I'm wondering if you have experimenting feeding your worms charcoal or biochar.
Yes.
How's your process been?
I sift it. So we have an emu. And what I'll do is I'll sift I don't give them big chunks because that's mean. They're sharp. Don't do that. Worms don't like sharp things, and it slows them down. So I sift out a bit of the charcoal from the emu, which has been created in a low oxygen environment. It's not quite a pyrolysis kiln, but it's pretty close. Ah, I see Easton having an idea, right? Emu time. So it's one of the best ways that, because it's made out of wood ash and we don't put any treated wood inside of the emu. So it's nice, clean ash that we know has no chemical in it. And so I'll sift it and then give it to the worms. And I guess I didn't give them a big enough lump because it didn't really seem to affect them. But I've heard good things about the ash's effect on pH inside of the worm bin. So I'd like to do more experiments, but from what I saw, it didn't bother the worms at all. And it created the same fluffy compost.
Wow.
I've heard that the ash can decrease compaction. That was the caking that Evan mentioned in his presentation. So using ash will actually make a fluffier and reduce your compaction and add potassium. So.
Wow, I didn't know that. Cool. And when you fed them the charcoal, do you mix compost with the two or just the charcoal?
Oh gosh, no, I mixed it. I don't give them anything ever straight. I use a lasagna method. So when I put the food waste on, I'll put a layer of the shredded cardboard. Then I'll spread the food waste like cake frosting over that. Then I'll put another layer of the cardboard so that they never drown in wetness. And then it gives those air pockets. Because if you give the worms only one thing and they have nowhere to escape from it, they can suffocate. The pH can become off, and then they've got nowhere to go. So you want to always give them air pockets, places to go, bedding underneath. So you're creating for them a house, an environment in which to thrive. So you want to think about what your wormies need, maybe not as obsessively as I do, but you're creating for them a home. So you want to give them comfy places to be. So never 100% of one thing or another, always the mix.
Have you any experience creating worm generators?
No. Do tell. What is a worm generator?
It's a box where you're just breathing, like you're just increasing your worm population, and usually is made out of like rich nitrogen, like foods, whether it's manure or food scraps, but you basically just want to get more worms, grow your worm population. And then usually it's inoculated with manure.
Oh, I thought you were talking about generating electricity from worms. I got all excited.
Oh.
But our entire bin is made to be a worm generator.
Oh,
so it's a 40-foot long worm generator, hence the bedding and the richness at the bottom. And I never, ever harvest all the way to the bottom.
Oh,
That is their breeding spot. That is where they lay their eggs. That is where they go to hide. So I have this environment, but I also use diatomaceous earth. So, okay. I'm going to give you my breeding method. So this is how you make a lot of worms. Worms are like chickens. They require calcium in order to make their cocoons, their eggs. So the more viable cocoons they can put out means you've given them enough calcium. I use the diatomaceous earth or the ground down coral in the worm bin to provide them that calcium, but it also has a great effect on the pH. And the diatomaceous earth makes the bin inhospitable to ants. So I'll tend to spread the diatomaceous earth across the top, and then the ants become discouraged because anything with an exoskeleton, diatomaceous earth is a bit like a bed of razor blades. It does not affect the worms. They actually love it. They will get all up in underneath where I put the diatomaceous earth, and they consume it, pass it to their bodies, make their cocoons, and make more worms. So that is that, and using things like sweet potato. sweet potato and kalo are the things that these worms love to eat and then reproduce. They'll make their massive mating balls the size of a softball inside of the kalo waste.
Wow.
I don't know why they love it so much. Maybe because it's slimy. I have no clue. But they love kalo and walla waste to make their reproductive, I don't know what you would call them. They're like softball size worm parties.
Yeah. Cool.
I always feel bad when I disturb one. I'm like, I'm sorry. I've ruined your privacy.
Can we come visit you?
Of course you can. Anytime. I'm there all weekend. We have specialty events in June, July. So every third Saturday is our cardboard shredding day. Our machines are down, so we won't be back in business for a little while. But every weekend, I do tours, school groups. So if you get on the schedule, I actually prefer that people schedule time so I don't overlap groups. Everybody would like to believe we're back to normal with COVID, but I like to protect everybody as best as possible and keep groups separate, just for the time being. That and everybody gets individual attention.
Yes. But thank you for answering my questions.
Of course, of course. And I'll put here, I'll put my email and phone number inside of the chat so you all have it. And there's no weird question. You can call, text is often better for me because I run around like a maniac, but I will get back to you.
Besides community composting and taking people's food scraps, do you think that having a worm generator, worm facility in your community can also be a way of making income for a worm farmer?
Yes, yes, it can. And you don't just have to be a worm farmer. You can be a separate stream of income for a regular farmer. These are things that don't take up much space that can be made available to your community with a minimum of expense in supplies and materials, a low barrier to entry into the market. This is one of the reasons that our bin is so big, because we want to be able to provide 2 startup operations. Instead of people being tempted to order in worms from off island, which come with a risk of invasive species, with a risk of becoming invasive themselves, we want to make these available to all of the startup businesses. Again, equity, access to the marketplace, enabling as many people to reuse and use resources and distribute resources as possible.
Have you guys sold worm poop or shishi?
You know,
not really for sale.
Not really. So during these first, because we're in research and development, we have farm partners that will provide it to, and they'll donate. They're always so generous because they know it's a valuable thing. But we ask that they report back to us how they used it and their results and general review, because we are in R&D. So it is limited to a very small number of people. And at this time, we'll make worms available by donation to households, nonprofits, and schools. So no, not commercially available yet. We want to make sure that our process and our methodology is correct. We've passed through the lab testing and we've done our due diligence so that we don't become a spreader of invasive species, pathogens, or bad practices.
Cool.
Julie's asking, is Mā'ona Community Garden open on Fridays too? No, not so much. It's by appointment. We dialed it back for COVID and I'm keeping it that way. So just text when you want to come. I'm in and out and around. Generally on the weekends are the best time because I'm there 12 hours each day, like a psycho. But I am there during the week as well by appointment. Questions? Oh, I think it is now 8 o'clock. One more question before we go. No, if not, thank you, Evan, so much. Thank you for presenting and sharing with our community. And thank you, Katie, for all your hard work to help us put this on.
Thanks for
And thank
having me.
you.
Thanks everybody for listening to me yell at a camera for a little while.
Yeah. And
Thank
if
you
you'd like,
so much, everyone. We will put this on YouTube tomorrow, and please email me, hfuu@hfuu.org, if you have any questions or comments. And Chantal shared her email as well. Yeah, thank you so much, Chantal and Evan. That was incredible.
have a good night,
Thank you.
everybody.